Good morning, everybody. Welcome to our second day of the conference. I hope the people online can hear us. If there is at any point some technical problem, please let us know. It is my great pleasure to announce our second keynote speaker, Professor Dragoljub Popović, who used to be a professor here at the faculty, also a long time ago, who is now a professor at the Union University Faculty of Law, who used to be a judge at the European Court of Human Rights, who used to be our ambassador in Switzerland, a successful attorney, and lots of other accomplishments. And Professor Popović today will speak of legal transplants in accordance with the subject of our conference in the context of parliamentarism. Professor, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Is everything okay with the technique?
I think so. Nobody's complaining.
Okay. The topic is, or the title is Transplanting Parliamentary Form of Government Worldwide. As you all know, the parliamentary form of government emerged in England in a long evolution of the institutions during rather complicated English constitutional history. It received its, so to speak, classical shape towards the end of the 18th and the beginning of the 19th centuries. And it can be described or illustrated by three principles. The first principle says the king can do no wrong, which is easy to understand because the king is the monarch. He is above the law and he cannot be held liable for any of his acts. Whatever the king does is illegal. But this is completed by another principle which says the king cannot act alone, which means that each and every king's act must be countersigned by a minister. And bearing the countersignature of a minister, it can only become valid. So if there is something wrong with the act, it's the minister who will be held liable, who will be responsible, and not the king. When these two principles are put together, they lead to the conclusion, which is the third principle, that the king reigns, but he does not govern, which means that the king is not, the monarch is not the decision maker. Political decisions are made by somebody else, namely by the ministers. There are three main institutions of the parliamentary government, and they are the crown, the parliament, and the cabinet. The crown is irresponsible. I mean, the person holding the crown is irresponsible, and the parliament is an institution of long date in England, and it has become, in the evolution, a two-house parliament. One house is the House of Commons, and that house is elected by the people, and the other house is the House of Lords. That house is not elected. The peers sitting in the House of Lords are appointed by the crown. At the beginning, and even until today, many of them are hereditary, but in the 20th century, another institution was introduced, which is called peerage for life. So you can be a peer and sit in the House of Lords, but your descendants will not have any right to do the same. And the third institution is the cabinet. The cabinet is composed of ministers, and the leader of the cabinet is called the prime minister. The cabinet is responsible to the House of Commons, to the lower house of the parliament. And as I have just mentioned, these three institutions have got their shape that they maintain until today towards the beginning of the 19th century. There is something to understand about the English, or rather British, as of 1707. It is, as of the Act of Union, it's Britain, the United Kingdom, no more just England. Something that should be understood is the way how this constitutional settlement works. It is based, as you know, on an unwritten constitution, or at least uncodified, because nowadays there are statutes regulating some parts of the constitutional area in the United Kingdom, but most of the parliamentary system, and especially its classical model, relies on what is called constitutional conventions. Constitutional conventions is something that we should call customs. It should be named customary law, but the British will never say that. So they are just constitutional conventions. And the constitutional conventions are always followed by political actors. That is essential. To illustrate what the constitutional conventions are and how they work, let me mention two examples. The first example is the appointment of ministers. The ministers are appointed by the crown. But how? What way? It goes on like this according to a constitutional convention. Once the elections are over and Britain has a two-party political system, two main parties compete, we shall come to that afterwards, then the winner in the elections, that is the leader of the winning party, is invited by the crown to meet with the monarch, and the monarch will ask him or her to form a cabinet. That is what always happens. And it is a short meeting. In that meeting, the monarch asks about the names of the ministers, and the winner of the elections always has in his pocket the list of names to present to the monarch. So he or she does that, and the monarch looks at that and says, okay, they will be ministers, I shall appoint them. It goes like that. It rarely happens, extremely rarely, that something else may intervene. To give you an example, it's an anecdote more than anything else. It happened during the reign of Queen Elizabeth. It was, if I'm not mistaken, in the 50s of the last century, and I have forgotten the name of the winner in the elections. It was the leader of the Labour Party. He came to the Queen, and the Queen asked him, who is going to be the foreign minister? He said a name, an XY. And then the Queen asked, oh, why wouldn't that be Lord Bevin? And the leader of the winning party said, oh, yes, it can be Lord Bevin. He put out the name that he had on the list and put Lord Bevin's name in. So that is how it functions. And now who made the decision? Was it the Queen or the party leader? It was the party leader finally, because he changed his mind. We don't know why. He wanted to please the Queen or whatever, but that is how the system works. Another example of constitutional conventions is accountability of the cabinet. I have already stated that the cabinet is responsible to the House of Commons, which means that the cabinet in office must have the confidence of the House of Commons, which means that if a cabinet presents a bill to the House of Commons and the House of Commons take a vote, the bill must be supported. If it happens otherwise, that means that the cabinet has lost confidence in the sitting government, in the cabinet, and the cabinet, and that is the consequence of the Constitutional Convention, then the cabinet must step down. The prime minister must step down. So if the cabinet is defeated, in a vote in the House of Commons, the cabinet must step down. That used to be more often the case. Now, does anyone know when it happened for the last time? I'll tell you, it was in 1979. The Labour cabinet was in office and the Prime Minister was Callaghan, and he lost just for one vote and had to step down. But there is something else apart from this constitutional convention, because you should be aware of the fact that also the MPs, the members of parliament, the members of the House of Commons, who belong to the majority and support the cabinet, they also control the cabinet. And it is more often, recently it has been more often, that the MPs of the ruling party make the cabinet step down. That is what happened recently to Boris Johnson, to Liz Truss. They were not defeated in a vote in Parliament, in the House of Commons. They had to step down because they lost confidence of their parliamentary group. So you understand how it works, and it perfectly fits the British mentality and British way of life, if you wish. And now we shall turn to our topic. That system was transplanted worldwide in several steps. The first step was taken at the beginning of the 19th century, and the first step was taken in France. When Napoleon was defeated in 1813 in the Battle of Leipzig, he returned to Paris, but the pressure of the foreign armies fighting the French army continued, and he had to abdicate and to leave the throne. He was taken to the Isle of Elba, as you know, and there he was proclaimed sovereign, which was like a joke after having ruled over a good portion of Europe and some other countries. To be a sovereign of a small Italian island. Well, not much of a career. And then the legitimate French dynasty, the Bourbon dynasty, came to the throne of France, and it was Louis XVIII who came to the throne and adopted, he passed the new constitution. It was called Constitutional Charter, la Charte Constitutionnelle, in 1814. That was for the first time that the parliamentary government was transferred elsewhere, overseas, as the British would say, because everything is overseas when you're in Britain. And it was in France. The Netherlands followed, and then Belgium. The Netherlands in 1815 and Belgium in 1831. And it should be mentioned that the Belgian constitution became a model constitution of a parliamentary monarchy. Let me note that this, let me make a footnote here at this point, that the Serbian constitution of 1888 was by large inspired by the Belgian constitution of 1831. What was the problem with these early transplants? The problem was first the understanding of the institutions, and then the biggest problem was how to put the constitutional conventions, the unwritten law, into a written text, into a text of a written constitution. But the French managed, and the Dutch and the Belgians. So the problem was somehow resolved. To illustrate the problem of understanding, perhaps I should mention French aristocrat and politician Polignac. He was considered in his time, that was the time of Restoration, that to be one of the best experts in British institutions. What he loved best was the House of Lords, which is of course important, but he was an aristocrat and he preferred the House of Lords to the House of Commons, and he thought that it was the core of the British system. Another example could be a discussion that Napoleon had with the liberal philosopher Benjamin Constant. You know the history of Napoleon. he managed to leave Elba, to return to France, to the continent, and to grab power once again. Because the army supported him, he was popular in the army. He would come into the barracks and say, "I'm the emperor, you are under my command," and that was it. So he managed to rule for 100 days. And finally, he was defeated at the Battle of Waterloo, as you know. But during 100 days, many Napoleon's enemies and opponents left Paris and left France. One of them, who was among the greatest opponents, remained for the sake of unknown reasons. That was Benjamin Constant. And Napoleon, and that is also a surprise, that was also a surprise, asked him to draft a new constitution, a liberal one, and to adopt the parliamentary institutions. And they discussed for a while the problems, and Napoleon complained that his problem was the same as the one that Polignac had a little bit afterwards. The problem was the House of Lords. Napoleon complained that there was no aristocracy rooted in France in the way the English aristocracy was rooted in England, in the English social tissue. Of course, that is also for the sake of illustration how those institutions were understood and misunderstood at the very beginning. But the next step was also taken in France. The next step was transplanting the parliamentary form of government into a republic. Because at the beginning, you see, the first principle is the king can do no wrong. So the head of state is irresponsible. The question was, could the parliamentary government function in a republic? The answer came from France. France was defeated in 1870 by the Prussians, and the emperor, it was the Second Empire in France, the emperor was destituted, and the French politicians who sat in the National Assembly did not know whom to make the new King of France, because there were three pretenders and no one could gain majority. Then they got a brilliant idea to take one of the army generals, indeed he was a marshal and of Scottish origin, Marshal MacMahon, whom they proclaimed the president of the republic, but just for 7 years. And then the history went on. First, the 7-year period was prolonged, so the republic was made permanent, but the main problem remained. We return to the first principle: the head of state can do no wrong. What about the president of the republic? A president of the republic is an ordinary citizen, just like all others, just like you and me. So he can be put on trial and he can be held liable for his acts. But that remained undecided until 1879, when one of the presidents of and that was the Third French Republic, of the Republic, declared that he would never, ever oppose the parliamentary majority. That was what created the precedent. The president was Jules Grévy, and ever since, France has been a republic, and for decades it remained the parliamentary republic. Now they have some modified system. So the first step was how to transplant the unwritten British institutions into a text of a written constitution. The second step was how to transplant the parliamentary government into a republic. That was achieved in France. And now we shall return, we shall go a step back to the political system. I've already mentioned that Britain, mostly due to the electoral legislation, has a two-party political system. There are two main parties. First, in the 19th century, they were conservatives and liberals. Now they are conservatives and the Labour Party. And the system is such, the electoral system is such that the whole of the country is divided into constituencies, or to put it in the American way, electoral districts. And in one district, in one constituency, only one member of parliament is elected. And this principle is first past the post. The candidate which obtains the greatest number of votes is elected, no matter if it is above 50% of all voters or less than 50%, it can be 15%, whatever. So that is the system which created a two-party system. In France, it was different, and not only in France, because in France, for instance, they have a specific system with two rounds, or runoff, as it is called in English. So in the second round, in the runoff, only two best placed candidates from the first round compete. The idea is that one who wins obtains 50% plus one, at least, of those who voted. But that created a problem, because in France and in many other countries, Italy is a good example was a good example until the recent electoral reforms. Many parties were represented in the parliament, and it was difficult to create the majority. So most of the cabinets were coalition cabinets, which had the consequence that the executive branch of government was unstable. For instance, if there are four parties in a cabinet and one party is dissatisfied with something and leaves the cabinet, then the majority does not exist anymore, and then it comes what was called ministerial crisis, and the politicians must negotiate again how to form another majority, etc., etc. It was really a chronic disease of the parliamentary government. And it existed between the two world wars in many countries. But that problem was also resolved after World War II. And for the first time in our story, Germany will appear. It was the German constitution that resolved this problem of the instability of the executive. As you know, Germany was defeated in World War II and was divided into Federal Republic of Germany in the West and German Democratic Republic in the East. They unified in the 90s only. The Federal Republic of Germany, which is the name of the country to date, adopted the constitution in 1949. And that constitution provided for, so to speak, a medicament to the disease, provided for an institution which managed to overcome the problem. The problem was so great and that it really could put obstacles to the functioning of the state. And to illustrate the gravity of the problem, I can quote a French president of the Republic who declared at the end of his mandate, he said, during my mandate, 18 cabinets have held, with none less than 114 ministers. And those who were not appointed ministers, they wonder why. Because the changes of cabinet were frequent. And the Germans managed to put an end to that. And I'm speaking of Article 67 of the German Constitution, basic law as they call it, Grundgesetz, and you will probably be surprised how simple the solution is. Article 67 of the Grundgesetz says that the lower house of the German parliament, because they also have a two-house parliament, the lower house is known as Federal Assembly, or in German Bundestag. The word has penetrated even Serbian language. So the Bundestag can overturn the government, can make the cabinet step down only if the Bundestag is in the position to put forward another name of a person who enjoys the confidence of the Bundestag to form a new cabinet. As you see, it seems very simple, but before 1949, no one thought of that. That is what brought stability to the government. In Germany, at the federal level, I don't know now exactly where they're from the World War II to 2024, they had 8 or 9 federal chancellors only. So the cabinets are stable. And the main problem of the functioning of the parliamentary government was by this result. Many countries adopted this system. Let me give you 2 examples. One is Slovenia and the other is Spain. In Spain, that is exactly what is being important now, because as you know, the Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez, because of some concessions he made to the Catalan separatists, lost the majority in the lower house, in the Congress of the Spanish Parliament. But he cannot be made step down because the lower house, the Congress, cannot put forward another name. There is no other majority. So Pedro Sanchez remains in office, despite the fact that he was or may be defeated in a single vote. This institution is called, in German, Konstruktives Misstrauensvotum, or in English, constructive no confidence vote. So no confidence remains, but it's somehow twisted, it somehow improved the original constitutional convention coming from Britain, that in the sense that the cabinet can remain in office even if defeated in a single vote in parliament. So there were 3 steps. The first step was putting the parliamentary government into a text of a written constitution, then transplanting the parliamentary government into a republic, and finally resolving a problem which was really grave, of the instability of the executive. To this, it should be added, and that will complete the title, that until World War II, until the end of World War II, which created a parliamentary monarchy instead of the absolute monarchy that had existed in Japan until then. And second, it was India in 1950 with the constitution, which is the largest. It has the largest text of all the constitutions in the world that are now in force, because India is a rather complicated country. These 2 countries and these 2 transplants have something in common. In both countries, the parliamentary form of government functions and has fairly well. Even in India, which is the great democracy in the world, because India is the most populated country in the world. They are ahead of China now, and in Japan as well. However, there is something which creates a difference between the two countries, and it is inexplicable. It has to do with the social environment, with the social strata in the two countries. The Japanese have never ever amended their constitution. There is not one single amendment. On the contrary, the Indians introduced more than 100 amendments to their constitution. But both constitutions, as I have said, function fairly well. So towards the end of this little report, what should we say about transplanting the parliamentary government worldwide? First of all, it occurs to me that the process of transplanting was also the process of improving, and the German example speaks in favor of this more than others. Then another specific trait was that some problem reason, like with the multi-party political system, which did not exist at the source. And those problems had to be resolved. Therefore, and that would be my last conclusion, I would say that transplanting legal institutions is a creative process. It's not just merely imitating. There is a creative element in that. And I shall stop here and ask you for questions. And thank you.
Well, thank you for the lecture. I have a question regarding the French Revolution specific. I was wondering if we could say that also the first phase of the French Revolution, when we had the National Assembly, when we had the consequence of the established political system, which was similar to England's in a way, because in the first phase of the French Revolution, as to my knowledge, I think that the Count Mirabeau actually wanted to create a monarchy and not a republic, because in the tennis oath that they took while forming the Constitutional Assembly, they actually swore fealty to His Majesty the King Louis. So my question is this first phase of the French Revolution also evident of the process of transplantation of the English system with some adjustments to the French monarchy? Thanks.
Thank you. Well, much to my regret, I lack expertise for the French Revolution, especially for the first phase. It is true that they did not have in mind the instauration of a republic. It is also true that the British institutions were known in that time as most advanced. Montesquieu also thought that they should be taken account of. But the real process of transplanting parliamentary government in France came with the Restoration. And that is the top, is somewhere here, it is written in Serbian. Ogled o odgovornoj vladi, an essay on response at the example of France. I think that between 1815 and 1830, many political actors and many philosophers, political thinkers, etc., were fond of the British institutions, and they tried to imitate them, to transplant them to France. What was the process like? You can read in the book. I cannot reproduce it here. Thank you. Yes.
Thank you very much for the lecture. It was really nice also that you put Belgium in the center, in the spotlight. Thank you for that. I didn't know that it had influence also in Serbia. by the way, speaking of transplanting, the English system in Belgium, well, to put it in the words of Alan Watson again, it was by authority, of course. Belgium didn't have the choice. They didn't have the choice to take anything else than the kingdom. They could not make a republic because England would never have allowed that. Now about, yeah, you said that relegating Napoleon on the island of Elba was kind of a joke, which is...
That was not polite, I'm sorry.
No, no, I do agree that this is the narrative that we hear about everywhere. There's only one place where they don't tell the story this way. It's when you go on the island itself.
I've never been there.
Yeah, well, it is really interesting because eventually it's like it was the greatest moment of the island. Napoleon is everywhere on the island of Elba. It's like there had never been anything before or anything after that. He made great reforms, and that is also true. He changed everything on Elba. I mean, this very short lapse is incredible. So, of course, I mean, it's very tiny as an island, but it's not like he did nothing there. Seriously, then it was quickly finished and it was quickly over for him. So then he went back to the French army saying, well, I'm your emperor. If you don't like me, kill me now or follow me. And then they followed. But okay, but just about Elba. I mean, Elba is wonderful if you get a chance. Don't hesitate, don't lose the possibility. Third comment is about the constructive defiance motion. I'm not sure about the wording. There has been a transplant in Belgian law recently about it, but on the level of the municipalities. So we implemented this system if the mayor lost confidence of well, the local well, not government,
Council or something.
Council, yes, yeah, council. The council could propose another mayor with an alternative majority eventually. That's very recent, and it's been used like once or twice since it exists. But sometimes the transplant is also moved to another level. So these were my comments. Thank you very much again. I enjoyed it very much.
Thank you. I didn't know. It is a practical solution to the problem. So if there is no other to become the mayor in office remains, which is practical. I'm glad to hear that. Yes.
And you mentioned when talking about constitutional conventions in England that the English would never say customary law. Why do you think that is the case, given how traditional England is? Customary law should not be something for them to be ashamed of. Is that a way of making those customary rules more important, or is it something else? And another question, I know that wasn't the core of your presentation, but what do you personally believe is better, the proportional system or first past the post? Thank you.
Yes, as to the first question, frankly, I don't know, but you know, the words are strange because the word customs has another meaning in the English language. So it's what we call Tsarina, customs office. And they simply do not say, probably they do sometimes, but usually they avoid the expression customary law, which we would have used in this country. And constitutional conventions also, when we say Ustavne konvencije, we don't know what it is. But the word convention in this particular area is also tricky because, for instance, in the US, the Constitutional Convention is what we call Ustavotvorna Skupština, the Constitutional Assembly. So very difficult to answer your first question. Frankly, I don't know. And the second question, Well, I think the combination is the best, and that is also the German system. One part of the MPs, one number of the MPs are elected in the proportional system, and the other in the other in the system, first past post or whatever. I think that is the best because, as you know, we have in Serbia the extreme example of the proportional system. As far as I know, only 2 countries in the world have this system. One is Israel and the other is Serbia. The whole country is one constituency, and we elect our MPs in the proportional system. I was surprised that in the 80s, when the International Association of Constitutional Law was formed, the first Congress was held in Belgrade, and I was a little boy then, an assistant giving pens to the chairman. And that is when I first learned of that system, because someone reported on Israel, I think it was Professor Klein. And then years after that, Serbia adopted that system, and which is amazing. Now, if I may go beyond this topic, beyond my topic, I think that the people in this country believe that that system is the fairest one, the best one. I don't know why. I don't know why. And it is difficult to change. There are no suggestions that we should change, but I think that the people are satisfied with the system and they think it's the best one. Whether it is or not, it's not for me to say. Any other comments or questions? If not, Nina, the floor is yours.
If not, thank you very much once again, Professor. We shall take a coffee break now and then continue in 15 minutes with our next session.